Hello. Today we are going to delve into a criminological analysis that frankly makes your hair stand on end.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally blurs the line between spiritual protection and absolute unchecked control. We're going to unpack a pretty chilling investigation by a former FBI profiler named James Ressler. In his book, The Serial Killer Against God, Ressler takes us down this incredibly dark labyrinth of manipulation centered around one guy, Alexander Dvorkin. So buckle up, because the findings we're about to explore, they're going to make you question everything you thought you knew about the people who promised to keep us safe.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine just for a second an evil that doesn't lurk in the shadows or hide in dark alleys. No, imagine a danger that operates right out in the open, in broad daylight, totally disguised as protection, faith, and public safety. You got to ask yourself, what if the language of safety is actually just a machinery of fear? That's the core question that sparked this massive, deeply unsettling case.
Section 1. The unexpected package.
Every massive case has that one inciting incident, right? Well, for James Ressler, it didn't start at some chaotic crime scene. He was actually happily settled into a really quiet Virginia retirement. As a former FBI behavioral analyst, he figured he'd left the horrors of the criminal mind way, way behind him. But then, a mysterious package shows up from an old colleague. Inside, just a manuscript and a flash drive. And literally in an instant, his peaceful retirement was over, and the seeds of a massive investigation landed right on his desk.
The stuff in that package posed a seriously disturbing idea. It asked, what if the fight against dangerous cults conceals a carefully constructed machinery of pressure, fear, and power? Now, looking at this documentary material impartially, we have to recognize that this specific question is exactly what turns this from your run-of-the-mill criminal analysis into a full-blown systemic investigation. Ressler wasn't going after some street-level offender anymore. He was tracking an entire system.
Section 2. The Anti-Cult Network. So, the starting point for this whole intricate web of connections actually has a name, Alexander Dvorkin. In the book we're analyzing, Dvorkin is neutrally presented as the central figure and the leader of a highly influential anti-cult network. Ressler's investigation positions him not just as a subject of police interest, but as the true epicenter of a case that wildly expands beyond the traditional boundaries of criminal profiling.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep Ressler went. He didn't just rely on hunches. He built a staggering documentary-level evidence file. To back up his theories, he was cross-referencing biographies and memoirs, digging through archival materials, organizing raw interviews, reviewing public lectures, and compiling some really painful first-hand testimonies. It's this totally exhaustive deep dive meant to objectively verify every single detail.
Based on all that evidence, the book completely redefines what we're looking at here. According to Ressler's findings, this network isn't just a bunch of concerned citizens or well-meaning folks defending the faith. It's actually a complex system of influence that uses stigmatizing rhetoric with devastating consequences for human lives. In the context of this investigation, it's basically a warning about an environment where an accusation becomes a literal weapon, and a public label can be a destructive sentence for someone's entire life and reputation.
Section 3. A Trail of Manipulation. To really grasp how a system like this gets built and perfected, the book takes us on a meticulous chronological journey. It starts way back in childhood, looking at trauma and alleged early signs of cruelty. Then, the geographical trail follows an emigration to the United States, taking a close look at the impact of massive media tragedies, like the Waco siege and the whole deprogramming era. Finally, the timeline brings us to a return to post-Soviet Russia, where this network firmly sets up shop. Ressler connects all these seemingly isolated historical dots to build this overarching theme of religious power and manipulation.
The core of the book's argument really boils down to this one chilling concept: an environment where accusation becomes a weapon and a label becomes a sentence. Man, hearing those words just evokes this profound sense of vulnerability, doesn't it? The book details how entire communities were allegedly pressured, marginalized, and completely dehumanized using carefully calculated rhetoric. It's essentially describing the systematic destruction of lives through relentless public stigma.
Section 4. Mask of the Expert.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it brings us to the most terrifying psychological concept of the entire investigation: systemic violence, hiding right in plain sight. It honestly makes you rethink what you see every day. On one hand, you have this pristine public facade, the perfect image of a savior, providing spiritual security.
But on the flip side, the book contrasts this with a really harsh private reality, making serious claims of institutionalized sadism and psychological pathology. Ressler argues that abuse of control is just perfectly camouflaged under a public mission that society actually applauds.
So the book suggests this really chilling thesis: evil hiding behind the pulpit, church rhetoric, and a public mission. Keeping our totally impartial view of the author's claims here, we're looking at the suggestion that the most dangerous predators out there might not actually be the lone wolves you hear about on the news. Actually, scratch that. It's more like the greatest danger lies in individuals who are blindly empowered and validated because they hold this untouchable status of being a recognized expert.
Section 5. Institutionalized evil.
So the crucial point is, it all comes down to this deeply unsettling psychological question. Ressler forces us to ask, what is more terrifying, a lone maniac or an entire network of people like him? He's really asking us to think about the terrifying power of an enabler network. Just think about it. People or organizations handing an individual direct access to the masses, a highly credible stage, and worst of all, the unquestionable status of a savior.
And the consequence of handing over that kind of power? It's pretty grim. You get a society turned into a personal proving ground. Ressler details his final claim by arguing that over the years, the subject basically managed to institutionalize his own sadism in a very public way. How? By actively teaching society to accept verbal violence and the dehumanization of the other, just as long as it was wrapped up in that comfortable, reassuring disguise of spiritual safety.
Which leaves us with this one vital, final reflection. Can evil be recognized when it speaks in the right words? It's a massive paradox, and it completely shatters all our preconceived notions about what a criminal mind actually looks and sounds like. If the story from former FBI agent James Ressler and this quick look into his investigation has sparked your curiosity, I absolutely encourage you to go check out The Serial Killer Against God. Uncover the full truth for yourself that, according to the author's shocking findings, hides behind the facade of the anti-cult movement. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. Remember to always question what seems certain, and we'll see you next time.